People who've had their private photos leaked without consent. What happened and what did you do about it? Welcome back to our channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Story 1. When I was 19, I was briefly involved with a guy and made the mistake of sharing personal photos with him. Important note: if you're underage, never do this. It's both illegal and dangerous. Things ended badly when he cheated on me with my sister, who eventually became pregnant with his child. They stayed together, but he continued to message me and couldn't seem to let go. I moved on and started a new relationship, but a few months in, I began receiving calls from the US, I live in Canada, which started to rack up my phone bill. Eventually, I got a text telling me that my personal photos, along with my full name, address, and phone number, had been posted online. I immediately suspected him because he was the only one with those photos. I was too scared to involve the police at the time, and since I had no concrete proof, my boyfriend reported the situation to Crime Stoppers. Unfortunately, they didn't take any action. Fast forward 5 years to this past June, and he's still with my sister, now with 2 kids, but the harassment started again. He messaged me, asking me to him and city while my sister was out of town to go to a concert with him, and hinted at wanting to hook up if I didn't enjoy the concert. I turned him down, which annoyed him. During a camping trip with my sister, he drove through my town in a separate car and messaged me, asking for my address to meet up. Again, I refused, which only upset him further. When I blocked him, he became enraged and began threatening to post the photos again. Feeling cornered, I finally went to the police. They spoke to him, and thankfully, he stopped contacting me. However, the situation caused me to decide, with my parents' support, not to attend family gatherings like Christmas anymore. My family's decision to remain neutral made it clear that I'd rather surround myself with supportive people who genuinely have my back. While it's frustrating and ridiculous that this drama has dragged on for so many years, I've learned a lot from it. Please, take care of yourself, and if you choose to share intimate photos, be cautious and make sure you trust the person completely. If you're underage, don't take the risk. It's not worth it. Story 2. This was one of the most difficult experiences of my life. In high school, during my freshman and sophomore years, I was a bit of a loner. I didn't have much experience with relationships or talking to girls. I had a crush on a girl named Kendra. We talked and texted, but we were just friends, though she knew how I felt about her. After a year of this, one Friday or Saturday night, I received a text from her. She was acting differently, much more forward, and seemed interested in me. I was naive and didn't think much of it, hoping it was real. She eventually asked me for some intimate pictures, and at the time, I didn't understand the potential consequences. I sent her the pictures, thinking it was a way to get closer to her. Things quickly escalated, and she started making more requests that I went along with. I sent pictures of myself in different clothing, including some that were very private. Soon, the photos spread, and I was ridiculed by my friends and classmates. It felt like everyone knew, and I was made fun of constantly. The emotional toll was heavy, and I felt incredibly overwhelmed. In a very dark moment, I thought about leaving forever, but thankfully, I didn't go through with it. Since then, I've tried to heal and learn from the experience. It's been a long journey, but I'm grateful for the support I've received along the way. Story 3. A while back, I was in a relationship, and my ex-boyfriend had some pictures of me that I had taken for him, as I had drawn on my body and he wanted to see. A few weeks later, while he was away on a trip with his sports team, he asked me for more intimate pictures. He said I didn't have to include my face, just a picture of my chest or maybe a full body shot. I took the picture, but suddenly had a bad feeling about it, so I decided not to send it to him. The next week, my best friend told me that my ex had been showing intimate pictures of me to others. She recognized the drawings I had on my body, so I trusted her. It turned out that he had other similar pictures on his phone and was claiming they were of me. He later told me he was drunk and didn't remember doing it, and I ended up forgiving him. Some classmates had also seen the pictures. Years later, I met someone from his sports team who told me that my ex wasn't drunk at all and had been showing off. He also revealed that he had been the one to tell my best friend so that she could warn me. Story 4. A couple of weeks ago, my girlfriend went through something similar. One of her friends gave her a heads up that he'd seen her photos online. She reverse image searched some of her pictures and discovered that a couple she'd taken years ago had ended up on some ex-girlfriend site. We had no idea who could have posted them. She reached out to the site, asking for the images to be taken down. They replied, requesting a picture of her holding a piece of paper with the file names written as they appeared on the site. She sent it, and the photos were removed. So, in the end, no major issues, Problem solved, I guess. Story 5. This is something I've never shared publicly before, but I feel it's important to talk about to help others avoid similar situations. Back in 2010, when I was starting university, I made a mistake that taught me a tough lesson. At the time, I was a straight guy, newly single and struggling to navigate dating life. I was feeling frustrated and lonely. One day, a guy I didn't know added me on Facebook. He was from the same city as some of my friends, and since they were mutual friends, I didn't think much of it and accepted the request. A day or so later, he messaged me, saying his friend Jessica thought I was attractive. After another unsuccessful night out, I was feeling vulnerable and decided to entertain the idea. He claimed Jessica wanted to add me on MSN Messenger, which seemed a little unusual even back then, but I was optimistic and added her. Once we started chatting, Jessica was very forward, sharing personal stories and photos. She eventually asked me to share pictures and a video in return. At the time, I wasn't thinking clearly and decided to trust her. I sent pictures that didn't include my face, but I still felt uneasy afterward. The next day, regret and suspicion set in. I started piecing things together and realized Jessica might not be who she claimed. I reached out to a mutual friend, who confirmed my fears. The guy who had added me on Facebook had a history of tricking others into sharing private photos under the guise of a fake female identity. I was angry and felt violated but didn't want to involve anyone or report it out of embarrassment. Instead, I came up with a plan. Using some basic computer knowledge, I created a file that would delete itself and any other files in its folder when opened. I disguised it as something tempting, password-protected exclusive photos, and reached out to Jessica again. She was eager to receive the file, and as soon as it was opened, it worked exactly as planned. Jessica messaged back, furious, claiming all her files were gone, including something as crucial as a thesis. I played innocent, pretending not to understand what had happened. Eventually, the account went offline, and I blocked and deleted both the person and my old messaging accounts for good measure. Over the years, my photos never surfaced online, and I've found some peace knowing that my actions likely erased anything else he had taken from others. This experience taught me a valuable lesson. Be cautious about who you trust online, and never share anything personal with someone you don't know deeply. As a final note, if you ever find yourself in a similar situation, don't hesitate to seek help. Reach out to someone you trust or report the incident. It's important to take these situations seriously and prioritize your safety. Story 6. When my friend was around 19, she sent personal photos to a guy she met online. Over time, he started pressuring her to take more explicit pictures, and when she refused, things took a dark turn. He retaliated by posting the photos he already had over 300 times on her MySpace profile with the caption, "Devastated, she called me in tears, not knowing how to delete the comment." Together, we worked from our own computers to remove them. It took a while, and since she didn't notice the posts for nearly an hour, it's likely that some of her MySpace friends saw them before we could delete everything. We reported him, but at the time, there wasn't much else we could do. We were young and didn't fully grasp the severity of what had happened or how big of a deal it was that he had leaked those private photos. Looking back, it's clear how serious the situation was and how important it is to understand your rights and seek help in such circumstances. Story 7. Not a revealing photo, but this story is worth sharing because it's kind of funny. When I was in school, I got a part-time job as an art model. I was hired quickly because, at the time, I was the only male applicant. The pay was better than most other campus jobs, unless you were 21 and could bartend, which I wasn't. One of my first gigs was for a painting class. My job was to hold a pose for 3 hours while students painted me, unclothed. Surprisingly, it wasn't as awkward as you might think, mostly just boring, standing there in silence. After a few sessions, I barely even noticed the whole being naked in front of strangers part anymore. During one session, a student painted a particularly impressive piece. She was ambitious, creating a giant oil-on-canvas work even though it was an intro to painting class. It turned out great. I might be a little biased though, since it was of me. A couple of days later, I went to pick up my work schedule. When the elevator doors opened, I was so shocked I nearly stumbled. The art department had hung her painting in the main hallway of the largest building on campus, right in front of the elevators. There I was, almost life-sized, my entire body captured on canvas for all to see. While we were told during orientation that anything created in these sessions could be displayed, I didn't expect it to happen so soon, let alone with my first painting session ever. It was a little overwhelming knowing everyone in the art program had seen it. To make matters more awkward, I had a lot of friends in the program at the time, so naturally, Many of them recognized me. Cue some interesting conversations about their interpretation of the artwork. It was definitely a memorable experience, and despite the initial embarrassment, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I'd model for a painting class again. Story 8. This was an incredibly stressful and overwhelming time in my life, but thankfully, the consequences weren't as severe as some of the stories I've heard. I've learned a lot from the experience, and I appreciate that growth. I had no idea that my photos had been posted until I received a message from a lawyer in California on Facebook. Someone had shared private images of me, along with my Facebook and Twitter links, on one of those revenge websites. To this day, I'm still not sure who did it. The lawyer who reached out to me was working on a class action lawsuit to get the website taken down. It was months of anxiety, random people adding me on Facebook and hoping no one I knew would see the pictures. Fortunately, the website was taken down after about 3 months. I was also just 17 or 18 when the photos were taken, and this happened around 6 to 7 years ago. I really appreciate that lawyer. He was incredibly helpful, made me feel as comfortable as possible, and assured me that the website would be shut down without me having to pay any takedown fees. Edit. Some people assumed I was a woman, but I'm actually a guy. Edit 2. I want to clarify that I had sent the picture to maybe 2 or 3 people, and it's possible they shared it with someone else, like a girlfriend, who could have had bad intentions. I had some suspicions about who might have posted it, but I never had any proof. That's a story for another time. Story 9. This isn't my story, but a friend of mine from college had a pretty crazy experience. He lost his phone at a party and someone found it. That person posted a video of him engaged in intimate activities with 2 other men on his Facebook account, which was still logged in on the phone. After a few days, the phone was returned to his mailbox. That's how everyone found out he was bisexual, something no one knew before, not even his girlfriend. To clarify, no one knows if the video was recorded before or after he started dating his girlfriend, and no one had the heart to ask him. He didn't come to college for about 2 months after it happened. When he returned, he seemed okay and acted like nothing had ever happened. He graduated and as of last year, I heard he's working in fashion advertising. Story 10. This happened back in 2006, during my freshman year of high school, on Yahoo Instant Messenger, YM. I thought I was having a private chat with my boyfriend, but it turns out that someone else on my friends list had access to the conversation. They recorded it and sent it around my school. Everyone made fun of me for something personal, and the school counselor ended up talking to me about it. Thankfully, it all blew over and was forgotten within 2 weeks. Story 11. While we were together, my now ex-boyfriend shared some private pictures of me on a website. He was exchanging them with other people, who were also sharing similar photos of their partners. When I found out, I was extremely upset because I didn't even know these pictures existed. My face was visible in them, and I never would have agreed to have them shared publicly. What made it worse is that many of the people he sent them to were local, so it felt like I could easily have been recognized. I asked him to remove everything, but unfortunately, I couldn't control copies that others might have kept. His excuse was, "I didn't think you'd mind." We ended up breaking up shortly after that. I looked into the possibility of taking legal action, but because it wasn't deemed to have been done with malicious intent, there was nothing I could do. Story 12. A friend of mine was tricked by a fake profile, and unfortunately, he ended up sending a private video of himself. The person who received it recorded it and then posted it online, demanding money in exchange for taking it down. We all reported it, and thankfully, it was removed quickly. We couldn't help but laugh at how careless he had been, and his response was, "I don't care, I looked great in the video." Story 13. After I ended my relationship with my ex and told him I didn't want to continue, he retaliated by sharing intimate pictures I had sent him in the past. At the time, I sent a few pictures to him because he repeatedly asked, and I gave in to stop the pressure. Unfortunately, he sent these images to nearly everyone I knew, including my father. But the worst part is that some of the pictures he shared weren't the ones I had originally sent. I don't remember ever taking them, but they are definitely of me. Since I'm a minor, I immediately reported the situation to the police. I haven't received any updates yet, but it's been incredibly tough. I've been struggling with anxiety, depression, and just overall feeling overwhelmed. I'm seeing a therapist and trying to stay in touch with the police as they investigate, but it's still an incredibly hard time. The idea of being exposed like this, with no memory of the photos being taken, has really impacted me. Edit. He's 21 years old and I'm 18. The police have looked into the possibility that I might have been unknowingly drugged, but since the photos are several months old, it's impossible to confirm that. I've been able to track a rough timeline based on things like my changing hair color and the fact that we broke up in June. Unfortunately, I don't think the police are neglecting the case. After distributing the photos, he moved out of state, which complicates the investigation. He's also told some of the guys he shared the pictures with that he took them and has more. Thank you so much for all the support and kind words. Story 14. About a year ago, while I was in college, I started talking to a girl on Snapchat from out of state. She seemed cool, so I decided to chat with her, and we exchanged some pictures. It felt like a fun, casual conversation, and I didn't think much of it. A few weeks later, I started receiving messages from someone I didn't recognize. It turned out they had the pictures I had sent to her. After some digging, I learned that a person from my hometown, who was closeted, had convinced this girl to get intimate pictures from me and other guys. When I found out, I spoke to him directly and told him I wasn't interested, but he was persistent and kept trying to pressure me into meeting up. I made it clear that I didn't want anything to do with him or his attempts at blackmail. Unfortunately, the pictures spread within the local community, including to a few of my close friends. It wasn't ideal, but it didn't have as much of an impact on me as I initially feared. I just decided to move on and not let it bother me. Story 15. So, when I was younger, I ended up marrying my ex at 18, but it wasn't a great relationship, and we split after less than 2 years. During our time together, I did send some private photos, but thankfully, I made sure my face wasn't visible in them. Sometime later, I met someone new. We hit it off really well and eventually decided to move in together. We had an open conversation about what we both liked, including our views on adult content. One day, while I was working on some homework, he came in and asked, "Hey, is this you?" He showed me a private photo of myself that I didn't recognize being posted online. I was absolutely mortified, fully expecting it to lead to an argument. What surprised me was his response. He remained calm, understanding, and expressed his belief that I had not posted it and that it was from the past, when I was with my ex. He didn't let it affect us or bring it up again. Now we've been married for almost 2 years, and this all happened about 5 years ago. Even though he likes to tease me about things that make me uncomfortable, he has never mentioned those photos again, and to my knowledge, hasn't searched for them. Overall, I feel incredibly lucky with how things turned out. Story 16. A couple of years ago, I went to a friend's house party and started chatting with a girl there. One thing led to another, and we ended up being intimate. However, I must have passed out afterward, lying on her bed, completely unaware of what was happening around me. The next morning, I woke up to find myself alone, still in my socks and feeling embarrassed about the situation. Turned out that the girl took a photo of me while I was in that state and sent it to one of her friends. Later, I walked back to my friend's house, still feeling the effects of the night before, when he surprised me by showing me the photo. It turned out that he had shared it in a group chat with people I wasn't particularly close to, and the image had circulated among a wider circle. Since then, I've become much more open about myself, realizing that there's not much that can truly embarrass me anymore. The only thing that frustrates me is that if I had done something similar to her, it would have been viewed much more negatively, whereas the situation was treated as a joke simply because it happened to involve a guy. Edit. Just to clarify, I never pursued any legal action. Honestly, I didn't even consider it. As for the red mark, I'm not sure why it was like that, but it seemed to be the focal point of most comments when people saw the picture. Story 17. A while back, I was using Periscope to joke around and make fun of what people do on the platform. One day, for some reason, I got the idea to stream myself, and I ended up doing something pretty risky. I decided to expose myself on Periscope, partly out of curiosity, and partly because the idea seemed tempting at the time. I streamed myself to see how strangers would react. After the stream ended, one of my friends messaged me saying it was a bit much but that she had enjoyed it. I was completely confused at first, but then I realized what had happened. Panic set in when I remembered that Periscope was connected to my Twitter account, so everyone in my contacts was notified about my stream. Fortunately, only a few people saw it before I took the video down, and it was all in good humor, but it really made me realize how dangerous that was. Since then, I've posted anonymous content on some online communities, where I feel more in control of what's shared. Story 18. I once sent some pictures to a girl I had hooked up with at her request. She seemed really impressed with my body, and though I think I'm just average, she thought it was something special. She ended up sharing those photos with her friends. At first, I didn't mind too much. It felt like some positive attention. But things got a little out of hand when I found out that some of my female coworkers and even my boss had seen them. I honestly thought I might lose my job over it. One day, my boss approached me and casually said, "Saw your photo, congrats, it's impressive. We've been together for 3 years now, and I guess it wasn't the career-ending event I feared. The only real downside is that I've seen my photos on some Reddit threads, mostly in gay communities, with people pretending to be me." Story 19. I'm not sure if this counts because it was completely unintentional, but here goes. My longtime girlfriend and I, along with a group of our close friends, about 15 of us, went on a booze cruise for spring break. We set up a group chat beforehand to organize everything, who's bringing what, carpooling, etc. Once we got on the boat, it quickly turned into a stream of pictures and videos of everyone being drunk and acting silly. After a week of partying, we got back to Miami. My girlfriend and I had booked our flight home for the next morning, so we stayed at a hotel in Miami for the night. We were both incredibly hungover, sunburned, and exhausted. I decided to take a bath to relax while my girlfriend was in the bathroom. She snapped a few quick photos of me just looking tired and defeated, soaking in the tub, and accidentally posted them in our group chat without realizing that part of me was visible in the picture. She was mortified and immediately tried to delete it, but everyone had a good laugh. To make matters worse, or better, the way the water reflected made things look bigger than they actually were. Overall, the trip was amazing. 10 out of 10, would do again. Story 20. This didn't happen to me personally, but it did affect my family, and it's something I think needs to be shared for awareness. We grew up in a close-knit neighborhood, where everyone knew each other. One of our neighbors, who had been helping my dad with some odd jobs, started making inappropriate comments toward me. At the time, I didn't know how to handle it, but I told my dad. My dad had noticed similar behavior from him toward other young women in the neighborhood. The situation took a serious turn when the neighbor's wife contacted my dad for support, as she had discovered some troubling information. The police were called, and the neighbor was arrested after authorities found disturbing material on his devices, including evidence of illegal activity. A few days later, the FBI came to our house to speak with my sister, as she had been involved in an unrelated incident where a private photo of hers had been leaked at school. We were shocked when the FBI mentioned her name, and it became clear that the neighbor was involved in a much larger illegal network. The FBI spoke with other young people in our community as well. As a result of the investigation, the neighbor was arrested and sentenced to prison for his involvement in illegal activities. The case affected many families, and the authorities took steps to protect the victims and provide support, including helping his daughter, who had also been a victim of his actions. This whole situation was a stark reminder of the importance of speaking out if something feels wrong and supporting those who have been harmed. It also shows the seriousness of the issue and how vital it is to stay aware of the potential dangers in our communities. Story 21. When I was in college, one night, my backpack, along with my laptop and other personal items, was stolen from my car. I was pretty upset, but didn't think much about it at first and just changed my passwords for most of my accounts. However, for some reason, I didn't think to change my Twitter password. The person who stole my laptop ended up logging into my Twitter account and posting personal pictures of me and my ex. I hadn't even remembered about those pictures until I saw them online. It got worse when I found out the thief was messaging someone else, pretending to be me, and sharing some private photos with them. In the end, this situation led to some uncomfortable moments as my personal photos ended up being shared with a lot of people, including friends, who had no idea about what happened. Story 22. I had this really close friend in high school. We were best friends, but things changed when we got a little too close. Unfortunately, it led to some tension and hurt feelings, and eventually, we went our separate ways. At one point, we decided to send each other fun, playful photos to stay connected. I went first and sent a silly picture of myself, where I had placed my phone inside a hot dog bun with some mustard and relish for a laugh. It was meant to be lighthearted and funny. I sent it, thinking it was a harmless joke, but within 15 minutes, my friends were texting me about it. They were all like, "Wait, is that really what we think it is?" It didn't cause any major fallout, and I've always been the type to laugh things off. It definitely became a funny story within our group of friends, even though it wasn't exactly what I had expected. But hey, it's still a memory I look back on with a smile. Story 23. When I was 19 and in my senior year at a private religious high school, I sent a private, non-nude photo to my boyfriend. Unfortunately, things went south when we broke up a month later. A freshman, whom I didn't know, came up to me between classes and informed me that someone had my photo up on a computer screen in a classroom, and students were taking pictures of it with their phones. This situation had happened to a friend of mine a few years earlier, and at that time, the school had expelled her when they found out. Their approach was that if the student came forward and explained the situation, they might be able to help manage it and allow the student to stay. After finding out that my photo had spread around the school, I felt I had no choice but to go to the administration and report what had happened. They confiscated my cell phone, which I believe might have been wrong, wouldn't let me speak to my parents, and called the police. The officers informed me that, according to the law, I could be charged with distributing inappropriate content since I was technically underage at the time. The situation quickly became overwhelming, and I spent hours in tears, feeling completely out of control. The police searched my phone and found no evidence of anything else. When I named the person responsible for spreading the photo, they questioned him but ultimately dismissed him, stating that I was the one who had started it. As a result, I was suspended for 2 weeks, which meant I missed a lot of assignments close to graduation. I struggled to catch up with schoolwork, and my teachers weren't very understanding. I barely passed my classes, and for the rest of my senior year, I was the subject of whispers and judgment from classmates. Some of my more religious friends even distanced themselves from me, saying they couldn't be friends with me because they believed it was against their values. And my ex? He faced no consequences. He was involved in sports and had a college scholarship, so the school didn't want to risk his future. In their eyes, I was the one who had initiated everything by sending the photo, so the blame was placed solely on me. Eventually, the police dropped the charges, but my parents were still very upset. I withdrew from everything and kept to myself until I left for college. Story 24. One night, I had a bit too much to drink and ended up bringing someone home with me. I don't remember much of what happened, just a few flashes of memories that, at the time, I mistook for lightning. At the time, I was working at a bar, and one of my coworkers was friends with this person. The guy came in to meet his friend, and my coworker made it a point to mention the situation to everyone, which led to it being talked about for a while. The person who had taken the photos apologized and deleted them. Luckily, it wasn't a big deal in the bar, as it was a slow night and not many people were around. But it's something I still think about sometimes. I was going through a rough time and wasn't in the best place mentally, which made me realize that being self-destructive wasn't helping me at all. I learned from that experience and have made sure never to put myself in that kind of situation again. I no longer keep in touch with the person who shared the details, but I've spoken to the guy in passing a few times. It's a small town, and he's friends with my brother-in-law. Looking back, I realize it was a mistake I made when I was at a low point. I didn't show my frustration or sadness to anyone involved, but took some time to process my feelings privately when I got home. It still bothers me sometimes, but I know that I'm the one responsible for the choices I made. Story 25. When I was 20, I received a message from an old roommate of mine from freshman year of college. She said someone had emailed her a link to private photos of me that I didn't even know were online. The subject of the email was something like "old roommate." I immediately contacted the websites where the photos were being shared and requested them to be taken down, though I made the mistake of using my personal email when doing so. A couple of months later, I received a threatening phone call from someone pretending to be from my college. They claimed that if I didn't comply with their demands, they would send the photos to my family. I reported it to the authorities, but nothing came of it. 5 years later, I was working in an office when I received another call, this time at my job. The person said they remembered me and threatened to send my coworkers the same photos if I hung up on them. I ended the call immediately and reported it again, but still, nothing came of it. This experience has had a lasting impact on me, contributing to severe anxiety that affected many aspects of my life, including my marriage. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, and I feel uneasy whenever I see a private number or an unfamiliar call. I had to explain my situation to my employer so they would understand why I don't answer unknown calls. Even though it's been 5 more years, I still lie awake at night, worrying about what else this person might try to do. Unfortunately, law enforcement often has limited options when it comes to these situations. I still don't know how my private photos ended up online, but they did. If you find yourself in a similar situation, avoid using your personal email when asking sites to remove your content. Instead, consider using a separate or anonymous email address. This can help protect your privacy and prevent those running these sites from tracking you down. Story 26. When I was younger, I made the mistake of thinking sending pictures to a guy wasn't a big deal. It was a time when camera phones were new, and I didn't really consider the consequences. After we broke up, because he turned out to be someone who wasn't worth my time or emotions, he decided to hurt me by posting personal content online, not only on my social media but also on a site that shamed ex-partners. He uploaded videos and pictures I had shared with him, including some innocent, clothed ones, and spread false, hurtful accusations about me. It was incredibly upsetting, and I didn't know what to do, so I ended up telling my dad. I had just turned 18 and was completely unprepared for something like this. I reached out to the websites where the content was posted, explained what had happened, and made them aware of my age. Thankfully, they took action, and he was banned from those platforms. Since I was still a teenager at the time, my dad got involved and made it clear to him that any further actions like that would result in legal consequences. The lesson here is simple. Be cautious about who you trust with personal photos. Even if they seem harmless, if someone has the potential to use them against you, they might. Always think carefully about the risks involved. Story 27. When I was a junior in high school, I was really insecure and struggled with confidence. Looking back, I realize I was vulnerable, and that's when a guy who was pretty popular started showing attention toward me. At the time, I was flattered and thought he was interested in me. We started texting, but we never actually hung out. I didn't fully realize what was happening, but every time I tried to make plans, he'd come up with an excuse or say he already had something else going on. I started to develop feelings for him, and over text, he eventually convinced me to send him a picture. He promised it would make him like me more. The photo I sent was meant to be playful and private, but after I sent it, I immediately regretted it. A few days later, things started to feel off. His replies became fewer and farther between, and I started to get nervous, but I tried to ignore it. One morning on my way to class, I heard a guy yell at me, "Hey, I saw your picture," accompanied by laughter from his friend. I felt so humiliated. It was clear that others had seen the photo, and I felt like I had made a huge mistake. The teasing and taunting from other students started right away. I was furious with him, myself, and the people who found it funny. I felt so alone and embarrassed, but I didn't feel like there was anything I could do about it. I didn't want to speak up because I was scared of being blamed. A year later, he apologized, but in a way that made everything worse, by sending an inappropriate message. I never told anyone what happened for a long time because I felt ashamed and thought that no one would understand. Looking back now, I know I wasn't at fault. If anyone is going through something similar, please know that you have the right to feel safe and respected. You're not alone, and it's important to speak up and ask for help when things feel wrong. Story 28. This incident happened to someone I know. They ended up on a harmful website, so we took action by reporting it to the police. The specialist in charge contacted the platform, and the content was taken down the following day. However, the images resurfaced on a forum linked to another platform. We immediately reached out to that platform's abuse team, but our requests were ignored. Determined to get the content removed, I took the step of finding contact details for the platform's leadership and their hosting provider. I sent a clear and formal request, citing the necessary regulations for removal, and gave them a deadline of 48 hours to comply. After receiving no response, I escalated the situation by sending emails every half hour, keeping the police investigator in the loop. I was prepared to take further legal steps, including exploring potential collective action with other victims, but just as I was drafting my final email, I received confirmation that the content was removed across multiple threads. I also used Google's URL removal tool to ensure that the harmful links didn't appear in search results. Now, thankfully, there is no trace of the images. For anyone facing a similar situation, remember to stay calm, be persistent, and take the necessary steps. Report to the platform, file a police report, and ask for their help in contacting the responsible parties. Don't give up. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.